Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. It is Novak Djokovic versus Jannik Sinner in a replay of last year's quarterfinal. And instead of being the quarterfinals, though, this year it's going to be the semi-final between the two. And I tell you what, this is going to be interesting because last year it went to 5 sets. Jannik Sinner was 2 sets to love up, and it looked like he might pull off an almighty upset. Djokovic came back, though, to dominate the next 3 sets and went on, of course, to win at SW19. This year, Sinner's going to look to get revenge. We've seen a couple of people flip results. Jabeur did it today against Rybakina in a repeat of the Wimbledon final. Loss she had, she reversed it, managed to win. Can Sinner do the same? Let's see. Before we get into it, though, remember that like button. Do subscribe if you're new, and do leave a rating or review if you're listening on a podcast platform. So this is how we're going to break it down. We're going to break it down similarly to like how we always do. And the first thing we're going to do is talk about their route to this stage, talking about who they've played so far and the results. Then on top of that, what we're going to do is look at their head-to-head. They've only played each other 2 times, by the way, spoiler alert, and Djokovic has won both of them, including that Wimbledon result, which we will talk about and reference as we get into this video. Then what I'm going to do is talk about it from a more technical and strategic standpoint and talk about what mainly, if I'm being honest, Sinner has to do against Djokovic, because Djokovic has won 7 Wimbledon titles. He's a big favorite going into, he's the favorite to win the title, and most people know what he's about, what he brings to the table, what his game entails. He is the GOAT. I'm happy to say that. So we know what he's capable of, but what can Sinner do to stop Djokovic, if anything? Maybe he can't. Maybe Djokovic is going to be too strong. And then ultimately, I'll give you guys my prediction and how I see it going in terms of a result and how many sets. Let's get into it then. So first of all, let's touch upon Jannik Sinner and his route to this stage. So he plays Cerundolo in the first round and also Diego Schwartzman, 2 Argentines. Cerundolo is not Francis Cerundolo, but his younger brother. He beat both of them in straight sets. Then Quinton Hannes, who's had a really good year this year, the Frenchman, he lost to Sinner in 4, but a valiant performance. And Sinner, though, too strong. Then he played against Gallen, another South American, and beat him in straight sets. Then he came up against Safiullin, beat him in 4 sets, who's had a really good tournament, the Russian, beating Shapovalov on his way to the quarterfinals. He hasn't had a particularly hard route, I have to say that. And when the draw came out, I did think that a lot of people thought that this is his hardest test by quite a margin than compared to anything else that he's had this year at Wimbledon. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? He's dropped 2 sets, I guess, and 1 set against Safiullin and 1 set against Hallis. They were playing some inspired tennis, you might say, but you probably expect him to maybe only drop 1, if not even any, against the level of opposition, given that he hasn't come up against any top 10 players, top 15 players. Djokovic poses an exponentially bigger threat. And I just wonder whether the lack of real quality grass court players could be a factor against Sinner going into this match. The one thing, though, that is definitely on his side is that he will be fresh. And a lot of the players, including himself, Holger Rune, even Alcaraz at times, have the next gen or the next gen, whatever generation you want to call it. At times, they've struggled in the best of 5 anyway tournaments to last the whole tournament fully fit without any niggles and potentially break down because of cramping or blisters. Sinner is arguably one of the biggest culprits when it comes to that. So hopefully he'll be fully fit, which is a big plus. For Novak Djokovic, he has had definitely a harder route. When the draw came out, though, everyone was saying it was a great route, and it was compared to some of the top players like an Alcaraz, but I think in comparison to Sinner, a lot harder. And I think maybe what happens when draws come out, even with Djokovic, is that you almost tend to play down the opponents because he's just so good, and you just think more about the matchup against Djokovic rather than looking at the standalone players that he's going to be coming up against, if that makes sense. So he beat Kashin in straight sets, Thompson as well, and then Wawrinka, who has a good Grand Slam record against Djokovic, as 4-all. They've never played though on grass. He systematically broke him down, though, did Djokovic. Then beat Hurkacz, which was a really good match, by the way. Hurkacz pushed him. It was 4 sets, but he had set points in that first set tiebreaker 6-3, didn't take any of them. Definitely should have done better. Djokovic took that one, took a second set tiebreaker. Hurkacz came back the next day, won the third set, and then the fourth set was 6-4 to Djokovic. So Hurkacz not far off, and keep one out for him in the next few years at Wimbledon. I can see him making the semi-finals, if not further, and he should do because he's got the game for grass. Rublev also put up a decent fight against Djokovic, took the first set 6-4, but then lost 6-1, 6-4, 6-3. And Djokovic, in my opinion, has Rublev's number when it comes to these type of big matches, and it's been a running theme. In terms of the head-to-head, then let's touch upon the two matches they played. This was an exhibition, so we won't touch upon that. 2021, Monte Carlo, Djokovic wins in straight sets. Don't need to talk about that. It's on clay as well. But the one that we want to reference and mention is the Wimbledon 2022 quarterfinal. Djokovic lost the first two sets, 7-5, 6-2. He then went on, though, to beat Sinner 6-3, 6-2, 6-2. So the last three sets weren't close. He turned up his level and he just said, you know what, that's great. You've had your time. Now it's time for me to take over. And he played some really good tennis. And of course, one of the biggest moments that came out of that match was that Superman or aeroplane backhand where, he does the splits. And it was an incredible shot, right? And it's been replayed multiple times. I'm not surprised. So, how does this match then play out technically and tactically? So, I'm mainly going to focus on what Sinner needs to do against Djokovic. And I told you why before, because look, Djokovic is just so good. And if you want a real analysis into Djokovic's game, I'll put a link at the end of this video to Djokovic. And it actually has video highlights that I took of him in person at the Laver Cup against TFO. And I analyze specific points and also match play and go into depth about his game and what makes it so good and break it down in minute detail. So go and check that out if you're interested in him specifically. But what can Sinner do against Djokovic? What does he need to do against Djokovic to have success? There's a few things. And the biggest thing for me is going to be the serve. He has to make sure that he's hitting his spots with a high first serve percentage and trying to win as many free points as possible on serve. Djokovic is the best returner ever to grace a tennis court. And on grass, I think it's hard to disagree that he's the best on grass, that's for sure. I think on clay, you could argue Nadal. Hard court, probably Djokovic as well. And on grass, I don't really see anyone else. Maybe Murray. Even then, I think it's Djokovic. Now, the kick serve is not going to be as effective, and a lot of people, of course, utilize that on the clay against him to his backhand, especially from the ad side. Sinner did that last year for the second serve, and he definitely had some success with it. But if you're going to hit that kick serve to the backhand, you've got to be, very close to the lines, and he needs to make sure that he's hitting it with enough angle that it's making it a little bit awkward for Djokovic. And he needs to hit with enough pace and spin to really rear up. And what might be in Sinner's favor a little bit is that Andy Murray mentioned this actually recently, so I'm not gonna take credit that and I think he's right. As Wimbledon goes on, the courts tend to be a little bit less bouncy and skiddy, and they tend to play a little bit more like a hard court, especially when it's really warm. And it is really warm in the UK right now. So, that is a little bit of a positive potentially for Jannik Sinner on the second serve, kick serve. But Djokovic, I think, there were some issues highlighted against Alcaraz last year in Madrid. And I think since then, a lot of people tried to utilize it with varying success. Now, I do think he knows it's a little bit of a perceived weakness, and he's really ironed out the majority of the chinks in it. But occasionally, it is still a little bit of an issue. And it's definitely, in my opinion, still his worst return, which isn't saying a lot because he's an incredible returner. That's something that Sinner should utilize, so he will. But the biggest thing for me is the first serve, hitting his spots. And I think the biggest thing for me is that he needs to have variation. He cannot, and one of the biggest things for me is the fact that Djokovic read Kyrgios' serve after the first set in that final, or started to read it. Kyrgios has one of the most unreadable serves in the game. So if you're anyone else on tour, you need to be creative with your serves. And that means hitting slice serve short on the juice side, going hard down the tee. And also, something that's very underrated, which Gil Gross mentioned on Twitter, was the body serve. And I've said this in one of my previous videos as well. The body serve is very underrated. Yes, for a first serve, I think it's great as well, but you've got to be really pinpoint with it on a first serve, because you get it wrong and it goes into the hitting zone of your opponent. It's a really, really difficult position that you're putting yourself in. Second serve, though, I think kick serve into the body. I'm liking it. Tuck up your opponent, make sure they can't attack you. What Djokovic does really well, which Alcaraz has been doing as well, which again, the reference Amy Lundy who said this about Alcaraz, which is going deep down the middle, and I talk about Djokovic going deep down the middle, and she said Alcaraz has adopted that. It's a really good tactic to utilize on grass. Djokovic has done it for years, and I've mentioned it in so many different videos. He's going to do that against Sinner. So the question is, how does Sinner, one, make sure that Djokovic avoids being able to do that consistently? And two, if he does do it, then he needs to come up with a game plan to make sure that he doesn't get to neutral, or at least isn't at neutral for very long. Because Sinner's, not just his serve, but his +1, which is his first strike after serve, have to be on point. He cannot be letting Djokovic get big inroads into his serve consistently, because Djokovic nowadays on serve, it's not a rally starter anymore. It's a real weapon, especially on grass now as well. And since having Ivanisevic in his team, it's become better and better and better. And he hits more aces, a high percentage of unreturnable serves, and he comes into the net as well and serve volleys at times. And he almost suffocates you because he's so good defensively, he's so good on serve, and now he has also added aggression and calculated placement to that forehand. It becomes difficult, right? But it really does. So Sinner needs to play out of his skin, no doubt, to beat Djokovic tomorrow, or in 2 days' time. That's my evaluation of this. Does he have the abilities to beat Djokovic? I do think he does, but he has to play a really high level. He's definitely capable of it. We've seen him play that against Alcaraz, and also definitely in moments in that match against Djokovic last year. Backhand to backhand, he actually is not in a bad position, because Djokovic has an incredible backhand. He does, but what that backhand does, for the most part, is it tends to break you down rather than really blow you away. The one shot, though, on that side that is a real danger and will be for Sinner is the backhand line. But Sinner's defense on the forehand side, getting across that forehand, is actually very good for the most part. So he should be okay on that side. The running forehand as well, one of the best on tour. Forehand to forehand, now Sinner needs to be careful here, because his forehand can be very, very good, but it can be quite inconsistent at times. And dare I say, almost even looks a little bit lazy at times with the footwork. He's an incredibly athletic player. He needs to be careful about how he's hitting, because sometimes he sacrifices depth and placement for power on that forehand. And I think he needs to find the right balance. And if he does, it's going to be difficult for Djokovic to handle. But at times, like we were talking about Djokovic a moment ago about going deep down the middle, Sinner needs to also be able to do that at times, because Djokovic soaks up pace incredibly well. Sinner needs to be a little bit more patient as well in certain instances, I think, because sometimes he just goes incredibly offensive in positions when he should not be trying to go for winners. And you cannot be hitting a high percentage of unforced errors against Djokovic and expect to win. He needs to play aggressive, Sinner, but he needs to choose his moments. Similarly, coming to the net is the same thing. And I think with coming to the net, there's a really important point to talk about here, which is the approach shot and where you place it. If I was Sinner, with a lot of players on grass, they tend to slice the backhand side because it's low, it's difficult. Djokovic is an expert when it comes to passing people, playing the backhand line at his ankles. We've seen it time and time again. If you want to do that, you can, but it cannot be the only approach shot that you hit all match. You need to go, in my opinion, harness the backhand and flat with a drive backhand, or even go across to the forehand. And even at times, go hard down the middle. As long as it's got enough depth, it's not going to be easy. And actually, at times, it gives Djokovic less angle even to pass you. But then that opens you up, of course, to the lob. So Sinner needs to weigh that up. I also think the drop shot for Sinner is going to be key. We've seen a lot of players utilize against Djokovic, and Djokovic is one of the best players at chasing down drop shots. Sinner is as well. These guys are both very athletic. They slide on the grass, which is incredible to see, by the way, as well. We're going to see a lot of athletic points. But Sinner, when he's able to push back Djokovic in the instance, he needs to then make Djokovic second guess himself. Is he going to play the drop shot? He needs to get him to think, is he going to try and go in behind me? Is he going to try and get me on the run to the other side of the court? He needs to get Djokovic thinking multiple things about what could happen and try and make sure that he's not able to anticipate him. And that comes with variation. Going behind Djokovic is not a bad ploy. Neither is going to the up and go, nor is a drop shot. But if you overuse it too much, Djokovic is incredible at being able to download the information and say, okay, this is how you're playing. I've got a game plan. That's it. I'm locked in. Good luck trying to break me down now. So Sinner needs to have variation. The slice is important as well, I think, but also angles, different types of play. And the good thing about Sinner is that he does have variation to utilize. He definitely does. So my opinion is Sinner should be able to put in a pretty good performance if he's at near his best. Returning wise as well, before I kind of finish up on Sinner, he needs to make a high percentage of returns. And the one thing he has to do is attack the second serve of Djokovic. If he's not going to be able to hit really aggressive returns, then go deep down the middle, but at least give yourself a chance. Do not hit a lot of errors on the second serve return, and do not hit second serve returns that Djokovic can get on the front foot to. If something's not working, then don't bang the drum continually until until it just becomes epidemic. Just try and cut it out and say, okay, how do I adjust? Because Djokovic is one of the best. Djokovic, Murray, Nadal, all these players, their tennis IQ up here is second to none. Sinner and Alcaraz in this generation, they need to be able to learn to do that. With on-court coaching, it's come away a little bit. These guys need to learn how to figure out themselves. Or if you're going to do it with your coach, fine. But have multiple game plans, have multiple ways of playing. Try and utilize it. Don't just say, this is how I'm going to play. Because against most players on tour, you can say, okay, well, if I play near my best, I'm going to beat him. But against Djokovic and Nadal, when they're playing at their best or near their best, and in these big matches, you have to be flexible in your game plans to say, okay, this is how they're playing today. This is how I need to adapt my game to make sure I win these matches, these games, these sets, and then this match. So that's my view on it. Now, I've gone into a lot of depth about how Sinner can beat Djokovic. We know how Djokovic can beat Sinner. If you don't know that, then go and watch the Wimbledon quarterfinal last year, and it'll become abundantly clear. Djokovic is a master on grass, and he's looking to win his 8th title at Wimbledon. Look, he's never lost. In the last few years, he's never lost a semi-final or final of Wimbledon. Sinner, the odds are stacked against him. They really are. In terms of result, Djokovic in 4 sets for me, I think it's going to be more straightforward than last year. I kind of hope that Sinner's going to at least take... I really hope Sinner will take it to 5 sets. And, if he was to win, I mean, that would be like... But I can't see Djokovic losing. That's my view on it anyway. I think Sinner's been playing some really good tennis. I do think, though, if he played better opposition and he beaten them just as convincingly, I would be more convinced about his chances. But it just so happens that his route's been so easy that I'm unsure about how he's going to come up against Djokovic. He's played some better opposition and he's been a lot more clinical. And I can't see it stopping, especially given what he said after the quarterfinals. He said, look, the pressure, he's basically saying he eats pressure for breakfast and he loves the pressure, loves the expectation. And he thinks, I think he said something along the lines of, I'm paraphrasing here, these guys want to win, but I'm not going to let them. And he's got this arrogance about him, which is arrogance, but in a good way, if that makes sense. It's ultra confident behavior that only someone who's at the pinnacle of the sport is allowed to have, and they should have, and that's why they're at the top. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Remember to that like button, do subscribe if you're new. We will be doing a live watch along for this match. Most likely it'll be me. Make sure you tune in for that. I cannot wait to call this. It's going to be a great match. See you guys later.